The first question I want to ask and answer myself is why world English? Well, for the simple reason that's what I am speaking to you right now. I'm speaking to you in what I take to be one of the varieties of world English, which is Indian English. I was born in India, as Tony introduced me a while ago. Well, I've been away from India for nearly half a century now. So I've lost most of my typical characteristics of Indian English, but I still hold that basically the form of English I speak is what I should still call Indian English. That's one variety. I'll go into the matter in a bit more detail. So the first question to ask is, what are we talking about when we refer to world English? Well, world English, let's straight away get it clear. Many people poo-poo the idea of world English. No, world English, that's a big joke. English is just one language. And why bring in this world English? I think that's totally wrong. It is something, I do believe that there is something called world English right now. World English, let me say what it is not. Some people might characterize world English as a makeshift language, some kind of a passing arrangement. No, it's just not. It's a full-fledged language. It's a language like any other language, any other known language. It's not a childish language. Some people call it childish or childlike. It's neither of them. It's another language. Lots of people use that language in their daily lives. Well, there's a big question as to, is it a natural language or is it some kind of a cultivated language? Well, before I answer the question, let me make it clear that I've never believed that there is such a thing as natural language to begin with. All languages are cultivated in some sense or another. But when people say there is something called natural language, what they really mean is that the faculty of language may be God-given. We all have, as simply for being humans, we all speak some language or another. But when you refer to this language or that language, English, Portuguese, Spanish, these are all languages that have been cultivated over a long period of time. There's a tremendous amount of human labor that has gone into perfecting each of these languages. Well, in that sense, world English too is a cultivated language, like English is, like Spanish is, like Portuguese is. Yeah. Does it have a single model or many models? Well, that's the big difference. The big deal about world English is that world English is multi-centered, it's multi-model. There's not a single model to begin with. It's no longer subservient to any other variety of English, any other well-established variety of English. As a language, I would use the popular American expression, it's a whole new ball game. It was not there in the 19th century, it was not there in the 18th century. It's something that mankind is now dealing with for the first time. There is nothing parallel to it in any time. Well, finally, it has no owner. No one can claim to be the speaker of world English by birth or whatever. In other words, world English has no native speaker, to use that fabulous expression coined by linguists. Well, world English does show signs of fossilization of different Englishes, but then so does many other varieties of English. I mean, few linguists who look at American English, Australian English, have pointed out many cases, morphological cases, that display fossilization of forms that pertain to Old English, Anglo-Saxon, good old times. Well, that said, when did the expression Old English at all became part of our common parlance? Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think the one who really championed the idea of world English was Tom MacArthur, famous linguist. who died very recently in March, 30th of March, something, he passed away. Scottish linguist who worked in India for a long, long time. He taught in cathedral school in Bombay for nearly a decade and a half, nearly 2 decades. And then, well, Tom MacArthur says that the earliest recorded use of World English dates back to 1927. And Oxford English Dictionary used it as an entry in 1989. They recognized that there is something called World English after all. And MacArthur himself has been championing this World English, but at times he has shown some kind of uncertainty as to use whether to use, say, English languages or English languages as single something. Even today, there's a lot of controversy on this topic. Is it one solid thing called World English, or there are many varieties of English, of many different Englishes? Actually, there's a journal called World Englishes. I myself wrote an entry into an encyclopedia of World Englishes. Well, I personally have my doubts as to we should call them World Englishes. I would still prefer the word World English. There are all kinds of important implications, whether you use it in the singular or pluralize it. I have a paper published in the International Journal of Applied Linguistics titled World English or World Englishes. Does it make any difference? And I believe that it does. It's not just a matter of naming something. After all, naming too does make a difference after all. That said, let's say one of the main characteristics of World English is that it has been absorbing words and turns of expression from all kinds of different languages, unimaginable. What started off as a mishmash, a hodgepodge, or whatever you want to call it, now it's a recognizable variety of English. It's the largest spoken language. When people tend to forget that world over, people say, "Oh, English has conquered the world." Well, wait a minute. It's not English language that has conquered the world. What has conquered the world is English that's been metamorphosed into something else. It's the metamorphosis of English that has resulted in World English. It has brought in influences from all other languages with which it was in contact, practically all of the world's languages. Let me move on to the one of the when I say fossilization of forms in English, one of the best example often pointed out is the survival of the subjunctive in North American English. Believe it or not, subjunctive has survived in English in its North American variety. And when we use expressions like, I suggest that every applicant fill out the form carefully. Not every applicant should fill out or fill out. That's a remnant of what you call the subjunctive mood in English. If I were you, I would do that. If I were you, that word is still what is left of the old use of subjunctive in English. If need be, okay, you can do that if need be. Again, subjunctive raising its head. Well, I started off saying that what I'm speaking is in Indian English. I still cling to some of my old uses of Indian English. Very well-known cases of every nook and corner. It's only in India you can hear that expression. In every other part of the world, you would hear things like every nook and cranny. There's no cranny in India. It's every nook and corner. Okay? Another expression, you can look it up and Google it, and you will find this word, out of station. Out of station is very commonly used in India to mean somebody is traveling, is not at home anymore. But it's so and so. Oh, it's out of station. Out of station meaning traveling. Okay? You have all kinds of verbal nuances like 𝗏𝗧, 𝗏𝗧 is the baton, or cudgel, truncheon. And the police are said to be written into newspaper, and you find things like the police lathi charge a large crowd. Lathi charge means use baton to disperse a large crowd. Thrice, the word thrice is still survives in Indian English. Thrice. Not many people have the remotest idea what I'm talking about. Once, twice, thrice. In Shakespeare, you find plenty of examples of thrice. Middle English, somewhere in Middle English, it died out. But then it survives in English. Now, I brought up this issue of whether you call this one, this new language, World English or World Englishes. The journal World Englishes, well, in its very title, authorizes the expression, these are different Englishes. I have my very serious doubts. One of the things is that when you use the word World Englishes, you are inadvertently pointing out the possibility of these Englishes dispersing to such an extent that it would end up in a situation that Tom McCarthy called the 𝗕𝗿𝗱𝗂𝗂𝗪 view of language. Like Babel Tower, the words getting separate and each will become unrecognizable over a period. That's a doom and gloom scenario being talked about. I don't think that's what's happening now. By the way, those who uphold this view have very often been tempted to compare World English to what happened to Latin, good old Latin language. Because Latin is supposed to have undergone the same thing. It spread throughout the world and became different languages over time, like Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, language. That's where the biggest mistake is, because the circumstances are totally different. What we are witnessing today is a globalized village. Right now, I am talking to people from 32, 38 different countries, okay? Which means in a flash per second, you can connect. The world is connected. The world is connected in a way that it was not when Latin spread. In other words, no matter how different your English turns out to be, there is an urgent, imperative need to make oneself understood across the variety. In other words, World English and the question of intelligibility. And that intelligibility, that's the way I put it, it sounds very easy. But then the more you think of it, you realize that it's a very tricky issue. What exactly do we mean by intelligibility? Jennifer Jenkins is a famous linguist, British linguist. Has written a number of books on this crucial question of English, especially in the post-World War II era, and what has happened to World English. She has, I mean, she doesn't any longer hold this view, but in one of her earlier versions of the book, she once came up with the idea that it must be possible to think of a bare minimum nucleus of Englishes, all these different Englishes. There must be some, basically phonemic contrast, some minimum amount of phonemic contrast are necessary for there to be communication. When I first read that, I thought, God, that's a fabulous idea. That's great indeed. But then, on second thoughts, I've had my very serious doubts on this. I said, do we need a common ground, a nuclear vision of language, bare minimum of language for there to be worldwide communication? And I'll tell you the reason why I resist that. Let me call it that. There are two ways of looking at it. If we have a cluster of things, cluster of different phenomena, in this case, different varieties of language, different English or different varieties of one of the same English, there are two ways you can talk of the commonality. Two mathematical concepts of HCF and LCM, highest common factor versus the lowest common denominator. Highest common factor would be, if you take numbers like 6, 9, 15, the highest common factor is 3. That's the bare minimum that is included in all these three numbers, 6, 9, 15. So 3 would be the highest common factor. The lowest common denominator would be 90. That's the number in which all these can be divided. 6, 9, and 15 can go into 90. I think it's worth trying to see a world language as being connected with all different varieties in the form in which LCM, the lowest common denominator, is. In other words, you don't have to have a situation where, let's say, a rancher in Texas says something, and a school teacher in Chennai, Madras, in India, can immediately understand what he's saying. No, maybe he doesn't understand what it is. But that doesn't make English any the less world English, because what the Texan says, the Californian can understand. Okay, what the school teacher in Chennai says, his next door neighbor can understand. People from other linguistic groups in southern India can understand. In other words, you don't have to have a common ground for there to be a world language. That's what I'm saying. In the end, what's going to seal the question is the communicability, how communication takes place. Communication is a much more trickier thing than people think it is. You don't have to have a common code for there to be communication. There are so many other factors that impinge upon the issue of communication. So I think LCM also is very interesting. The idea of thinking of world language through the lowest common denominator has the added advantage of providing plenty of wiggle room. World English has this. It has plenty of wiggle room in that. Okay, what I mean by world English in the sense is very simple. You go to any international airport, any major international airport, anywhere in the world, you find a queue forming and people trying to, okay, they try one language, doesn't work, and in the end they invent some kind of English. Okay, this is surprising. I've watched this happen several times. It's amazing to see how people do manage in the end trying some sort of English. God knows how where that English comes from. Okay. In other words, what impresses me most is that they do find ways of forming plenty of wiggle room in that. They get around these hurdles. So intelligibility is taken care of here. Well, now when I raised the issue of intelligibility, I wrote a piece in Journal of Applied Linguistics, nearly a decade ago, I think, which I call the soft underbelly of the issue of intelligibility. Because very often there are people still who cling to this idea that we need a native speaker to control the different languages. Native speaker is the one guarantee that all the different varieties of English will cling together. And I think it's completely wrong. I think it's completely wrong. If you see what's happening in the real world, people do talk to one another, and they don't care two hoots as to what the real form of saying something should be. No, they don't care. This is completely out of the issue. I cited in that paper I referred to in Applied Linguistics, I cited a piece of information that I picked up. In the early 90s, when the British Office of Commonwealth, Foreign Affairs and Commonwealth, I don't know if they have an office, they start releasing their documents belonging to the Raj, the British Raj in India. They have a 50-year gag period, they can't release these official secrets. After 56 years, the British government is obliged to make them available to public. So lots of tons and tons of stationery belonging to the bureaucracy in India, the colonial bureaucracy in India, they were made available. And some researcher, curious guy who went there and looked around, They found a piece of writing by someone, he says, in an official memo, the officer says, what Mr. Banerjee writes, Mr. Mukherjee seems to understand pretty well. And what Mr. Mukherjee says, Mr. Chatterjee seems to be okay with. But this is certainly not what Captain Simpson understands as good English. That's the colonial officer writing his angry comment on that. But the question is, damn it, there is no Captain Simpson running the show anymore in India. Okay? In India, they still use English, and they are not obliged to please any Captain Simpson anymore. They are doing it for their own purpose. Okay? All the major newspapers in India, and Pakistan the same thing, Pakistan Times, the Mail, they all publish in English. And they publish these newspapers not for the sake of Captain Simpsons to be as readers, but they are communicating. Indian Express, Times of India, Hindustan Times, and there it goes, lots of other newspapers, Statesman, they are all published in English. And they are published in English for the benefit of other Indians. So there is no longer any Captain Simpson running the show there. Okay? In other words, world English has taken a life of its own. Okay? This is the language that is here to stay, irrespective. It doesn't depend anymore on any native speaker. It's a language that is the only thing that's sustaining it is communication. And that's why I insist there is something called world English that's shaping up, with different dialectal variations, but any language, any other language, name a language which does not have internal variation. Okay? But what holds it together is the dire need to communicate to one another, which is evident in the globalized world in a way it was not in the past. And the beauty of the whole thing, the reason why world English is what it is that after the Second World War, when the English really grew exponentially in the world, English spread in mostly multilingual situations. The spread of English took place in multilingual contexts all the time. And that's why this language had to inevitably absorb expressions, turns of phrases from other languages. This is the natural way. There's nothing strange about this. Any language. This is the price that English had to pay for becoming international. Henry Wilson put it very, very tersely when he said that the English has become the world language. It's a matter of pride for speakers of England. Okay, but then they have to remember that the price they have to pay for becoming international language is no longer a national language. It has to be either one or the other, not both. Okay? It's not their national language that's become international. It has become international, and in the process, it has changed. And that change is inevitable. Okay, I said earlier that Tom MacArthur visualized world English as a language with different varieties. Here is a slide that will help you illustrate his own version of it. Very interesting. Please show this slide. No, the earlier one. This is 𝗪𝗔𝗘𝗟 famous model, right? And the one that's going to appear now is this. What do you to show the model? Yeah, that's it. That's it. Okay. He visualizes world standard English. That's what I call world English for simple thing. And different varieties of world English. And the amazing thing is that he puts American American Standard English, Canadian Standard English, Caribbean Standard English, South Asian Standard English, East Asian, and different varieties. They are all different varieties of the same language. Okay? This contrasts very, very markedly with the other picture. Please show the other one, the 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝗧 model. Tony, if you can show the 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝗧, the other picture, one, the color, the one in green circle. Yeah. Green, I said green, it's yellow, green, blue. 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝗧 circles, the 𝗪𝗏𝗄, this is famous model of this world-known model. All applied linguists and teachers of English know this model. He thought of the spread of English as 3 concentric circles with the so-called native varieties at the center, and outer circle countries where the English spread us through colonialism, and expanding circle which received English mainly after Second World War and all that. Okay, this is fine enough, but I think it's it doesn't really represent the world what is going on today. I think Tom MacArthur's way of putting it is much more interesting. I think the only difference between American English and what I call Indian English is the time it has taken to mature. American English has been there for a much longer time, and in English, Indian English is a later entry. If at all they can refer to something called Brazilian English, that's still more recent. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of time for Brazilian English to take characteristics of its own. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, I make a point of emphasizing this because even Brazilian, there's something called Brazilian English. Believe it or not, English is not one of Brazilian languages, but there's something called a typical Brazilian expressions in English, like point. The word point, geometrical point. Brazil has a typical use of 𝗍𝗁𝗁 with a final epenthetic vowel added to it. Point means a point of encounter where place where people meet, a place of rendezvous. Okay, so that's interesting because this fossilization taking place, different varieties of English are formed according to this different time periods. Okay, that said, I want to show what happens in truly multilingual conditions. I've prepared some video shows. Tony, could you illustrate the first one? Before you show that one, I want to introduce you to the people who are not familiar with this kind of thing. I'll tell you what you are going to see there. This is an interview with a famous Indian actress called Aishwarya Rai Bachchan. She's one of the very most popular Indian actress. She's being interviewed as to her experience of a film director she has worked with. And it's amazing. She starts off in English and passes into Hindi and turns back. And if you're going to find it interesting if you don't understand Hindi, you would say, God, what the hell is going on? You can pick up bits and pieces here in English and the rest is in Hindi. I can assure you watching her. Okay, please. Here it starts.
I think he's an absolute rock star, Rajni ji. उन्होंने जो कुछ कहा.
Can you hear the sound, Rajan?
Yes. Yeah. I can hear the sound. Yeah.
I think he just said it so wonderfully. He got a great sense of humor, and I think he was very, very. He is actually humility personified. वो बहुत ही humble इंसान है और इतने बड़े कलाकार हैं फिर भी बहुत ही अच्छे हैं. उनके साथ काम करने में बहुत ही मजा आया और बहुत शिक्षा भी मिली. When you work with a personality like him, like you said, in fact, not just the age factor.
Okay, but people who don't realize this is how many people are speaking English in India. They switch from one language to another. I'll show you one more. The second video might.
क्या कर रहे हो यार? Why are you stopping the car?
अरे कुछ नहीं है. I think I should just call B. He's flying ना. Flight land हो चुकी होगी अभी तक.
B.
भाई.
Oh, you're missing him, huh? Missing him already.
I'm not missing him. I just thought of him, yaar. I mean, he's flying na.
You're missing him. It's kind of cute, yeah.
It's not cute. He said he'd call.
It's truly amazing how people can work in two languages at the same time and not realize that they're speaking two different languages. Okay? There's one more to make things clearer. Can you show the third video?
Now, coming up with someone who is an extremely close friend of mine.
Close friend of hers, लेकिन मेरा best friend.
Oh, really?
Really?
मैंने अपनी पहली फिल्म में उसके साथ एक्टिंग की थी अर्जुन.
Good for you. मैंने पहली बार अच्छी एक्टिंग उसी की फिल्म में की थी.
ओह, तुम्हें पता है वो मेरी तरह दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा गैजेट फ्रीक है.
तुम्हें पता है वो दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा फ्रीक है. बिना सोए लगातार दिन रात काम करता है.
मेरे लिए तो वो एक फिल्म में मर गया, जबकि दो फिल्में उसने तुम्हें मारा. डिशुम डिशुम डिशुम.
वो तो झूठ मूठ का मारा था, जैसे झूठ मूठ से तुमसे प्यार किया था, दिल तोड़ा था, मगर वो मेरा सच्चा और असली दोस्त है.
You know, Arjun, this is getting really weird.
Yeah, exactly.
So here it is. I saw someone asking the question, is it translanguaging? Yes, it is translanguaging. But translanguaging is what typically takes place in many multilingual realities. And in situations where English happens to be one of the overall repertoire of languages in question, English has to be affected by these languages. This has happened all the time. This has happened to American English, this has happened to Australian English, and this has happened to all other varieties of English. They've been influenced by local languages, local dialects, what have you. And this is happening. It is inevitable. There is nothing to be lamented about this. You know, this is the natural course of things. This is going to happen to all languages. Okay. Then the final one. This is the final one I've chosen is an excerpt from a television broadcast from Pakistan, Pakistani television, and this is really interesting. It's an old one, 2014 or something, just before the elections in India. And elections in India was a hot topic in Pakistan. Look at what they are doing. Okay, it's Urdu.
वेलकम बैक. हम बात कर रहे हैं इंडियन इलेक्शन की. उसके साथ साथ हमने थोड़ा सा क्विकली डिस्कस किया ऑन द आर्मी चीफ स्टेटमेंट. बट कमिंग बैक टू द इंडियन इलेक्शन, आप भी आर्टिकल के ऊपर बात करना चाह रहे थे.
नहीं, मैं सबसे पहले इंडियन इलेक्शंस के बारे में देखिए कितनी खूबसूरती से इंडिया ने अपने डेमोक्रेसी को ब्रांड किया है.
राइट.
आप ये देखिए, आई थिंक वी मस्ट applaud the way that India has actually, you know, democracy.
Despite the reality.
नहीं, reality नहीं. This is reality. Democracy is the reality. So we must acknowledge that. We must accept that. 814 million voters. It is a huge administrative exercise.
Yes.
Can you imagine कि हमसे अपने वोटर संभाले नहीं जाते और उसके बाद कितनी देर तक हमारी आपस में झगड़े चलते रहते हैं.
लेकिन उनका कोई इतने दिन होते हैं उनके पास, उसका तरीकाकार उन्हें बना रहा है. That is much better.
नहीं, it's electronic voting है, administrative process. Administratively सोच लें कि त्रिपुरा और आसाम से लेके नीचे तक जाना, तमिलनाडु तक और ईस्ट और वेस्ट के दरमियान में क्या कमाल है. और यही कमाल है इंडियन डेमोक्रेसी का. अब देखिए, डेमोक्रेसी के बहुत सारे चेहरे होते हैं ना. एक तो प्रोसेस है, एक इलेक्टेड गवर्नमेंट है, इलेक्टेड सिस्टम है, और तीसरा उसके जो होते हैं ना कि डिविडेंड्स ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी। मेरा तीनों सूरतों में इंडिया ने बहुत सारे ममालिक से साउथ एशिया के और एशिया के काफी अच्छा ट्रेवल किया है फॉरवर्ड, एंड दैट टू नीड्स टू बी।
I find that one absolutely hilarious. People sitting back and forth the languages. The point, what I want to round off here now. The point here is that English language has become completely different as a result of this multilingual use. And this is there's nothing, as I said earlier, nothing to be lamented about it. Rather than that, we should be celebrating it, because that's one way a language maintains itself. The health of a language is to be measured by the way it handles different challenges. And in multilingual reality, English has found a new challenge. And the way it survives is amazing. Okay? I'll draw my talk.